Okay, so welcome to the March edition. Blimey, how did we get to March? Of the AWRC Colocators forum. It's great to see so many people on the call, and thanks to colleagues from CeBSAP for joining us today for a takeover. I'm really excited to hear about the work that's going on in that centre. But before we start, I wanted to do a couple of things. The first thing, Amanda will give a bit more detail on this in her update, but I just wanted to address the change in government guidance in relation to COVID restrictions and how that is being implemented at AWRC. You will have all no doubt seen the VC's email that's gone out, the all staff email, the recommendation that staff continue to wear face masks. At AWRC, it will continue to be a requirement that if you are on site and whilst you are moving around the building, you will still need to be required to wear your face mask. When you're sat down at your desk or in meetings, if those around you are comfortable, then by all means remove them. But we do ask that people continue to wear their face mask whilst they're on site and moving around the building. This is because we have some immunocompromised patients on site who are undergoing chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And we also have a number of NHS clinics that provide services, and it is still their guidance that it is a requirement to wear face masks whilst on site in NHS context. And so to comply with their clinical governance, we are also asking all staff to continue to do that whilst they move around the building. So that's where we are with that policy. Should it change in the future, I'll come back to you. I have had, I've asked the senior leadership group led by the VC for a mandate for this. They've gone away to think about it, but in the meantime, we're kind of implementing this. And I've also asked for some additional lateral flow tests to be available on site and prioritise for the research centre that staff working with NHS patients can gain access to lateral flows. Again, that is part of the risk assessment for working with immunocompromised individuals. So I'm hoping that they will be available on site for staff to use in the context of working with NHS patients on site. So if that involves you, or you want to know a bit more information about that, then please do feel free to drop me an email or drop Amanda an email. But that is the position on face masks and COVID at AWRC. So I'd like to then just move on to the second item on our agenda, and that is the co-locator updates and good news stories. So as always, we're hit by a wall of silence when I ask people for these good news stories. I'm hoping today is going to be a bit different. Does anyone want to kick us off with a good news story? Jace Brannan, brilliant. Over to you.
Got to rescue you somehow, Rob.
Thanks,
Hi,
Jace.
how are you all doing? Good to see you all. A couple of quick stories to update you on in relation to what's going on within the AWRC. One in particular is we've now got funding for a thing called a Youth PIRG, which is our Youth Public Involvement Research Group. We've got £15,000 of internal funding from within SHU, and we've also managed to match that with £15,000 of external company funding, actually. We're going to do it as a year-long pilot. The idea will be to bring in around about 20 youngsters from across the whole of South Yorkshire. We'll be connecting to youth services as well within Sheffield City region. And we'll be taking sort of guidance from people like Dave Pembroke, Sally Fowler-Davis, and the R&D for Business team will be running that project. So it's a really, really exciting project about helping youngsters both develop new pathways to education and also to careers, but also to upskill them in those areas and get them connected to AWRC in that area. So that's a really exciting one. The second one I want to mention very quickly is we've now closed our AWRC Accelerator Phase 2. We had 50 applicants for that, which is really good. And we also had applicants from across 13 different countries. So really exciting stuff. And you might remember from last time when I chaired this meeting, I think it was this one. And we spoke about, we had £150,000 of external funding to support the R&D element of this, and the internal funding with Insure as well. So that will be starting quite shortly. We'll be doing the selection of those companies soon. We'll be bringing in probably around about 7 or 8 companies in the first cohort, and you'll hear lots more about that as things go forward. So that's my 2 quick positive updates. Nice to see you all.
Thanks, Jace. That's great. Anybody else want to share any positive or exciting? Tom, great. And then I'll come to Simon. Thank you.
Yeah, not a work one, but we just sold our house within 4 days of putting it on the market.
Nice. Good man.
Didn't ask enough then.
Oh, no,
and we sold it for over asking price, so even better.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's good.
And
it normally goes to best and final offers in Sheffield, doesn't it? So you've done well there, Tom.
Yeah, and I get to move back over to the sunnier side of the Pennines.
Well, moving on. Simon, over to you, and then Dave Hember, I'll come to you.
Cheers, Rob. Mine's just a really quick one, and it's not really so much a good news. It's just a shout out to the PhD students. Our PhD students, fantastic. Just generally, it's just I learn it, so I remember it every week or every time I meet with them. But it's just forums like this that I just wanted to share that. I'm going to drop something in the chat, which one of my students, all my students are brilliant. I'm only picking out one here. There's just a link in the chat. I don't think it works on a Mac, unfortunately. But I just wanted to share what one of my students has done. It's groundbreaking research for us. It looks, maybe to some people, it looks dead simple, but this kind of work will trigger, huge amounts of contract research funding from our various partners. And I'm sure it has some healthcare applications. For those of you who can't see it, it's basically tracking 2 athletes, the distance they are, bounding box around them. We then put a pose estimate on those athletes. And it's just, again, shout out to the enthusiasm to bring the group, and they really are the engine room, like I say, of our research, and I'm sure that is the same across many research groups.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. So Dave, I'll come to you, and then Nikki and Ben.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'd like to point out that I'm on my bed, not in my bed. There's a subtle difference. Couple of things for me. First, I've spent the morning over at the EIS, where I was part of a Sheffield City Council stakeholders event, looking at their investment and strategy for city infrastructure. 100 million being contributed to infrastructure in the city for the leisure facilities and a 10-year plan. We celebrate the fact that Simon Shibley and Dave Barrett were leading part of that research in the presentation, and Move More got a very significant shout out throughout the morning. So there's some great things there in recognition and staff contribution and possibilities for the future. I'm sure there'll be some updates on that at some point. Returning home to meet you lovely people, I broke my personal best cycling from the EIS to lovely Loxley, 35 minutes, which is probably an extra 30 or 40% than Rob does it from similar locations. So yeah, a couple of points from me. Then finally, last Friday, for those of you who know, I am a researcher in residence on a fellowship with Darnall Wellbeing, and I am now an immersed researcher because as COVID restrictions has lifted, I'm now spending every Friday as a researcher, actually in residence, not on Zoom, with Darnall Wellbeing, which is where I'll be locating every Friday for the next probably 6 months. And so a really sort of significant step for us at the AWRC embedded in Darnall, and also for me within that research. So a few great points for me.
Brilliant, thanks, Dave. And that is genuinely exciting to see that that fellowship come to fruition on and get the insight on site from Darnall. Nikki, over to you.
Okay, this feels a bit selfish having listened to all Dave's then. I was just delighted last week I got a response back from Disability and Rehabilitation, which is quite a big high impact rehabilitation journal, and I've had a paper accepted from a PhD. So
brilliant, well done, Nikki. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. That's brilliant. Well done. Fantastic. Ben?
Yeah, so I have to be a little bit careful about this because it's embargoed, the news, but Rachel Young and myself were quite recently successful in getting £1.2 million worth of funding with ShapeMaster are a company that produce powered-assisted exercise equipment, 300,000 of which will be coming to Hallam, the majority of which is to the AWRC. So we're very happy with that, about that. And hopefully when the embargo is lifted, I can give a little bit more detail about what that will involve.
Fantastic. That's great news, Ben. Yeah, congratulations to you and Rachel and the team. Hard earned. I know it's been a long process to get that. So yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob.
Shona, final word to you, and then I'll hand over to Amanda.
Okay. First of all, we've got some funding as well. At least we think they do, but they've told us we have to ask for more money, which is very bizarre. Never had that before, ever. But it's not relevant to AWRC necessarily, although it might be in the long run, given AWRC too. And the other thing is, I am finally going to be applying for British citizenship. I have indefinite leave to remain. I'm not illegal. But now made it absolutely impossible for me to do certain things. It's £700 for bloody ID card, you know, the one all our students are shoving in front of us every second, or £1,500 for citizenship. And the paperwork is 80 pages long. So none of you think this is easy. We've already forked out as a family of 3 about £20,000. So
all the best with that. Some friends of mine have been through that process. So I think you've got to know the dimensions of the London Eye or something. It's probably one of the... I'm joking. Right, Amanda, over to you.
It's not as stupid as that sounds. It is what proportion of Catholics go to church on Sunday, and Liam didn't know whether to round up or round down.
Oh, Shona, it sounds like a beast of a form to complete. So I'm going to go through my update in terms of what's new, and it's kind of all linked to operations. So just to summarise, our current works, they're all finished. So that's a victory for me, Rob, in terms of getting BAM through the door and getting all that work completed. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for being so understanding and patient while they were in all the various floors and upsetting access toilets and all that kind of thing. And not linked in any way was the heating breaking, but that's all repaired now, so it's lovely and warm on levels 4 and 5. So that's I'm happy. Just a couple of housekeeping updates. So reception, I just want to make it really clear that reception doesn't open until 8 o'clock and we close at 6:30 prompt. Although the reception staff might be there, they're there for setup time to get themselves ready so that business can start promptly at 8 a.m. Sorry. And just a reminder in terms of tours, that if you want to bring a group around, you need to kind of clear that with me, just in lieu of making sure that you're not entering any rooms where there's business going on, and also for me to kind of connect anybody else within the AWRC who ought to know and potentially meet those people while they're on site. And just lastly, in terms of reminders, it's just about keep remembering to book desks on Connect 2. We're still wanting to monitor utilisation of all spaces at AWRC, and that's our tool for doing that. If you want to book a lab, obviously Connect 2 can do that, or you can reach out to Ian. And just from a consumables point of view, in terms of kind of covering anything you'll need in those spaces, essentially you should be trying to charge them to a research project. If you're not, you need to have a discussion about how we might cover those costs. So moving on to health and safety, because that's been a real hot topic for me actually since coming back in the new year. We've ran a first aid course on site last month, which was really well received, and actually I jumped in a bit early because that's on my next slide. But I just wanted to remind everybody about the emergency processes and who to call. And it's not Ghostbusters. If you're on SHU, it's AAA, and that will take you straight through to the central security room. Essentially, they will contact the emergency services for you, and that you don't need to worry about telling the ambulance or fire engine where to come. Central services will do that. You can focus on the emergency in hand. You can either do it from an office line, but if you were to pick up the black handsets that are in the corridors or on the landings, they just connect you straight through. And if all else, just contact reception. If you need first aid immediately, you can get reception. There is actually a list of all our current first aiders in all the boxes now. They've just been recently updated. Defibrillators, we've actually got additional ones on site now. So there's one located in the kitchenette down at reception. It's wall mounted, so it's very visible. There's also another one in the physical activity suite. And again, that one's wall mounted. And our first aiders are trained to use the devices, although anyone in the need of a situation can actually open the box and it will talk you through the process. It's something I always feared about with first aid, but somebody quoted something that says it's better to do something than nothing. So I'm going to hold that in terms of me working at AWRC. I'd hate to think we'd not acted and attempted to save someone's life. With regards to first aid boxes, again, they sit with the defibs wherever there's a defib. We've now got better signage up. So if in the event that you need one, again, there's one in the kitchenette, there's one in the physical activity suite. They are wall mounted in the offices up on levels 4 and 5 in the kitchenette areas. And we're also having them installed on the landings on floors 2 and 3. So there'll be a box on every floor, so you don't need to run around or up and downstairs to find one. Okay, so I mentioned first aid training. We ran a course successfully last month. There's another one scheduled for the 26th of April. I do have a few spaces available. And as I say, as you can see there, I do need 12 people to be able to actually run the course. So please do get in contact if you want to attend that one. If you can't make that date and you still want to attend, get in touch and we'll schedule another one. It would just be great to get as many first aiders on site as we can. And then linked to health and safety is fire marshal training. This is my next kind of topic to cover because I'm aware on any one day we don't have the same people in the facility and we need to make sure we've got a fire marshal plan. If we need to run another on-site training course, we can arrange to do that. So again, just reach out to me, let me know if you're interested in doing that. In terms of equipment and furniture, as we kind of start to return to kind of, I hate the word normal these days, but kind of back to working in a normal practice, we as an operations team have noticed there's lots of kit missing from the building. And that might have been approved to go off site at the beginning of the pandemic, but actually things have changed a little bit now. And actually, as we're kind of working and using more of the spaces on a regular basis, some of that kit is really needed back on site now. So there's a couple of reasons why we want it back. 1, we need to use it. 2, we need to get it pat tested on a regular basis. 3, on some things we need to arrange maintenance. So we just need anything that's kind of off-site that would normally live in the office to come back. If you still need it off-site, let's have a conversation about that. We may well still be able to kind of resource that for you, but if we can't and we need it back on site, there are other budgets that we can look into to provide people kit for what they might need. So I'm just going to open up an amnesty. No questions will be asked. If you had it for whatever reason, it was just a nice to have during pandemic, it made your life easy, that's fine. My request is today is just bring it back to site. If it can go back to its original home, that's brilliant. If you need something, just come and have a chat and we'll look at resourcing things. Good news, we now have a gardening club, and actually Dave's online. So Dave and Claire Parkinson are leading this moving forward, and the gardening club is to basically look after the roof terrace, the raised beds there. Dave and Claire visited Darnell Wellbeing's allotments to get some inspiration. Claire's not with us today, but Claire has actually said if you want to get involved, go and talk to her. Dave, you're on the line if I don't know if you want to add anything at this point.
Well, the basic intention was to grow hops and use the facility over the road to make AWRC beer. We did put a request in the budget for a rooftop jacuzzi and fridge, and that was unfortunately turned down. We will submit that again the next financial year. The intention is Wednesday afternoon, lunchtime, just, people who are available, interested, are willing, just to come and have a sort of potter around outdoors and try and make our space that we've got even more beautiful than it once was before it was ripped up to solve the leak. I think there's 5 beds and that's what we've got to play with. I've got no idea what I'm doing. Claire has a little bit more of an inclination, but I'm sure we've got some great green-fingered, knowledgeable people in the midst. Thanks, Rob and Amanda, for the support. Let's see what we can do.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. So reach out to Claire and Dave if you want to get involved there. We've also got some branded merchandise, which actually we've had for a while, but due to the pandemic, people have not been in to kind of access it and people haven't been going anywhere to necessarily wear it. So we've got both ladies and men's polo shirts and dress shirts. and I've just done some little images alongside there. Apologies that they're all creased and in packaging. But if you want one in terms of kind of going out or being branded on site in the day, come and see me. We've got a resource. It's there. Let's distribute it and let's have people wearing the kit. If it all goes, then we'll have to ask Rob for some more budget to get some more kit moving forward. So come and find me. I'm in the facility most days. We'll get you kitted out. In terms of who's new, we've only had one new co-locator, and this was actually yesterday, so literally hot off the press. So Harvey Anderson, who's a senior lecturer in the Academy of Sport, has now joined us. He was absolutely wowed at the motion analysis lab and can't wait to get started. This is just a shout out for Ali, who was on the line for Shoe Wellness. This did actually go out in an email just to let everybody know that Shoe Wellness is available, and actually appointments are being held at the AWRC. The email's there. There is actually signage up both at the sign-in point in the AWRC and actually in the Forge. But if you want to get a check, just get in touch with Ali, and that can be done on site quite easily. And that comes to the end of my presentation. So does anybody have any questions they want to ask?
Sharon has just got one.
Yeah, I'm off. One comment: do not assume the NHS staff know how to do first aid and defib. So don't run to them first. Just find our people. Well, but it's because they work in a hospital, most of them, and so the resources are there, and who actually know what they're doing. And second thing is, wouldn't mind having a conversation about the garden, because once a week is not enough watering till things are well established, or plant things that don't need to be watered all the time once they get established. Okay, so when I'm there on a Wednesday, which might be more often after I get rid of this current job, I'll bring stuff. It's easier. I can unload it on you guys. I got some things I want to get rid of.
That's great. Thanks, Shona.
Thanks, Shona. Brilliant. Okay, so if there are any other questions for Amanda, please put them in the chat or drop her a note privately. So we're going to hand over now to CeBSAP. Maddie, I'm looking at you on my screen. I think it's the first protocol. So yeah, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. So I've got some slides, which I will try and share with you. Just a second. Hopefully you can see those okay. Brilliant. So yes, thanks so much for inviting us to your co-locators meeting today. So we're going to be giving you a sort of a brief overview of CeBSAP. We have tried to kind of focus it and tailor it to sort of physical activity, which we know is your focus. So I'm going to do some slides at the beginning. So if you haven't come across me before, I'm Professor Maddie Arden. I'm the director of CeBSAP, which stands for the Centre for Behavioural Science and Applied Psychology, which is too much of a mouthful, hence CeBSAP. So we are positioned within the Department of Psychology, Sociology and Politics, and we're in SERI, so the Social and Economic Research Institute. And we haven't been going that long, really, especially when you consider the pandemic's been in the middle of that period. But we were launched in 2018 following an initial sort of shoe investment in our centre. So in terms of the structure of the centre, we have 4 themes. And each of the theme leads is here to present to you in a little bit, but I'll just kind of give you an overview of that structure first of all. So we have the Neurocognitive Testing theme, we have the Behavioural Science, Behaviour Change and Wellbeing theme, we have our new Preventing, Reducing and Investigating Criminality and Exploitation, which is also quite long and we're reducing to price. And then we have a 4th theme, which really kind of is a cross-cutting theme. It integrates with all of those, and that's applying psychological theory and research methods. So just to give you a little bit more of a flavour of how it kind of works. So we have me as a director, we have our theme leads who you will meet very shortly for each of those themes. And then in terms of who is the research centre, it's all of our research active staff within the department, so all of our psychology staff and our doctoral students. So CeBSAP is our research brand, if you like, for psychology research. And then we have
okay, could you share it as full screen, please? Someone's put in the message box.
Is it not full screen?
No, we
No.
can see your slides in the column at the side.
That's a bit strange because it looks like it's full screen for me. Okay, I'll share it in a different way then. Hold on.
You're just sharing the wrong screen is all.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's it. Cool.
Okay. So yes, so then we have our, in addition to the kind of academic staff and our doctoral students, we also have research staff. So we have senior research fellows, researchers, sort of linked to some of those themes, and our research support comes from CERI. So in terms of our sort of portfolio, we do a real mix of research. So UKRI type funded research, NIH, RMRC, etc. Some EU research, charity funded research. We do quite a lot of contract research for people like Public Health England, as was, the Ministry of Justice, Department for Education, and then some knowledge exchange and consultancy. And we've been doing recently quite a lot of training for people like NHS England and Public Health England. We started off sort of before the centre started with kind of really low levels of income. But as you can see, we have managed to kind of be growing since we started in 2018, so that we're anticipating when we get to the end of this financial year that we may have an income around £1 million. And we've managed to do that through the pandemic. So we're a growing research centre. So I'm going to hand over to our first theme lead, Lynn Barker, who's going to talk you through, and I'm going to be the slide person.
Hi, everybody. I think I've met most of you, so most of you are familiar with me, aren't you, at some level or another? Hope you like my spinning brain. I thought I'd put that in for a little bit of entertainment. Okay, next slide, please, Maddie. So I lead the neurocognitive testing theme within CeBSAP, and the guiding principle of that theme is that we want to measure, monitor and improve cognition in health and ill health using novel and innovative approaches. So we have various different strands of research type and methodology that segue sort of underneath that overarching theme. So one of them is quantifying and capturing normal cognitive function and impairments in health and ill health. The other is detecting cognitive change earlier and aligning biomarkers with cognitive markers, what we call the biocognate model. So it's kind of like having some sort of notion about what the functional outcomes of whatever physical biomarker you've got and how that's associated with overall well-being and functioning. Enhancing cognition with brain training, and we've got one paper out on this already. Inventing new assessment and diagnostic measures, which we're already doing, for commercialisation. The important point is, under our theme, we're interested in developing measures that are going to go to commercialisation, not ones that are just going to be used internally for research or whatever. And finally, experimental work, adopting a holistic out-of-brain approach. That's not the same as an out-of-body approach. And basically what we mean there is looking at other potential start points for neuropathological conditions outside of the brain, which is a general trend that now pervades cognitive neuroscience. Next slide, please, Maddie. So I haven't put all our projects on here. I just wanted to put stuff that might be relevant or of interest to you guys. But if you want to know more, please do email me. So at the moment, we've got quite a few movement disorder studies that we're engaged in. One of them is looking at exercise potentially combined with cognition and probiotic use and measure of the microbiome in Parkinson's disease patients. We've just completed a feasibility study in this area, so we've got some data to inform this. And this is a grant that we're going for together, Anushka Carter and I think Caroline is also involved in that. The second one is a similar sort of thing. It's patient characteristics, motor function, the microbiome in motor neuron disorder. So that's another movement disorder condition. And we're doing that in collaboration with CITRAN at the University of Sheffield, and that's funded. Then we've got patient characteristics, motor function, cognition, exercise, microbiome, multiple sclerosis. That's going to be led by Anushka. And again, we've applied for funding for that for just a very small pilot study. And the last one is a similar kind of format, but with long COVID, led by Caroline Dalton, who I'm sure you're all familiar with. So the reason why I wanted to use these as an example is just to give you a flavour that we are actually emerging area of expertise within microbiome-based studies in patients in vivo with motor disorders. And that means that we're leading in that area. We're actually ahead of the University of Sheffield. They've come to us to partner up on the MND project. Next slide, please, Maddie. So just to give you an idea of some of our kit, on the far left, you'll see a scan that's come off the retinal imager. We've got a very sophisticated retinal imaging camera that is able to slice through blood clots and other obstructions to give you a really neat picture of the neurosensory retina at the back. So we can see whether there's been changes to that part of the retina based on neuropathological conditions and whether they correlate with brain function. But what we can also do is we can measure the choroid function, which is the blood supply to the back of the eye, and that lets us know how quickly maybe drugs or vitamins or any other metabolites might be taken up, because this is the most sensitive area of the body in terms of biological cost. So the middle diagram shows you just a scan of a normal eye tracking pattern that's taken from our eye tracking camera. And what you can see is the inverted V with the eyes and the mouth is a normal scan pattern that most of us engage in when we're looking at others and trying to interpret their emotions or intentions. What we found with people with brain injury who have social cognitive deficits is that they don't follow that pattern. And we have a PhD student who's done some work in that area too. So the hypothesis would be that maybe some of those social cognitive deficits arise from that aberrant way of viewing others' faces. So that could be the start point of where that deficit lies. And then finally, over on the right, you can see one of our tasks that we're moving towards commercialization. This is CogLab, and it measures a range of cognitive functions in those with brain trauma, brain pathology, or even normals. We can measure it, we can use it with anyone, but it's basically designed to use with patients. So it's quick, it's interactive, it's fun, it engages their interest, and it measures a whole range of cognitive functions in one task. Next slide, please, Maddie. Finally, just to give you an example of some of our other resources, we have a massive test library. To a lot of people, that sounds pretty stale and uninteresting, but what it means is we can measure any cognitive ability from visual imagery through to working memory, through to cognitive processing speed. And the latter is a measure of white matter integrity in the brain. So we can do that with normal people, we can do it with athletes, we can do it with anyone. The other image on the right is just to give you an idea of our eye tracker. You don't need to wear headgear with our eye tracker. You can just perform the measures or the experimental tasks normally, which is a really great advancement on some methods. Then we've got the retinal camera in the bottom left corner, and finally our EEG equipment. Obviously, I'm just giving you a speedy tour because I've only got 5 minutes of everything that we've got. But if anybody's interested or wants to talk more, please do email me. I'll be happy to talk to you about things. Okay, Maddie. And finally, moving forward, what we want to do is establish a BPS accredited Neurocognitive Test Centre under this theme that we can use to offer training, but also to do formal assessments in research and with external companies. And there are some of our funders and collaborators. Thank you, that's my bit.
Hi everybody, my name is Rachel and myself and Abby Millings are co-leads of the Behavioural Science, Behaviour Change and Wellbeing theme. Next slide please. So broadly, our theme is interested in understanding why people behave in the ways that they do and designing and evaluating interventions to change those behaviours to positively impact on our health and well-being. We use psychological theory and behavioural science to understand behaviour, and we've done so in numerous different contexts, ranging from understanding uptake of the flu vaccine in NHS employees to examining the barriers and facilitators relevant for purchasing a non-diesel car. We've also designed and evaluated a number of behaviour change interventions. For example, we have recently evaluated whether new co-designed messaging increases uptake of the COVID vaccine in young people. We use a range of qualitative and quantitative methodologies, and we've worked with a range of different clients, including local authorities from across Yorkshire and Humber and more widely, as well as government agencies, including Public Health England, Public Health Wales, and the Department for Education. Next slide, please. So in much of our work, we draw upon the behaviour change wheel, which provides a systematic framework for understanding behaviour and developing interventions. Very briefly, at the centre of the behaviour change wheel sits the combi model, which proposes that in order for a behaviour to occur, such as physical activity, people need to have sufficient capability, opportunity and motivation. The behaviour change wheel also identifies the types of intervention functions that could be used to target those common factors underpinning the behaviour, as well as policy options that can help to deliver those interventions. Next slide, please. We might tend to think of the combi model applying primarily to the target person whose behaviour we want to change. So, for example, increasing physical activity in a person living with a long-term condition or in the general population. However, physical activity as a behaviour, we know occurs in a complex system. There are lots of different people within the system, and each of these people have different behaviours. And importantly, the combi model can be used within the system to understand the influences on different behaviours within the system as a whole. And we routinely work with multiple levels of behavioural systems, from target groups to professionals that engage with those groups, to managers that implement strategies, to policymakers that define the aims of those strategies. The next couple of slides show some example studies where we have conducted behavioural science research in the context of physical activity at different levels within this system. Next slide, please. So we have used behavioural science to inform tools and solutions that support healthcare professionals to deliver brief physical activity advice in primary care. So we were commissioned by Public Health England to examine whether the tools and solutions currently available to healthcare professionals address the barriers and facilitators to healthcare professionals delivering that advice as part of their Moving Healthcare Professional programme. And we did this by exploring whether healthcare professionals had the capability, the opportunity and the motivation to deliver brief physical activity advice by undertaking a systematic review and semi-structured interviews with healthcare professionals. And we then conducted an evidence review to explore the extent to which existing tools and solutions have the potential to address those identified barriers and facilitators by extracting their behaviour change techniques. Next slide, please. We've also used behavioural science to design and test behaviour change interventions to increase active travel for people living in Yorkshire and Humber. So we were commissioned by the Local Government Association to work with a consortium of 6 local authorities from Yorkshire and Humber to use behavioural science to design and test an intervention to increase active travel. So we explored whether residents in Yorkshire and Humber have the capability, the opportunity and the motivation to do active travel by undertaking focus groups. And we then designed an intervention by identifying behaviour change techniques that could address those key barriers and facilitators. And we're currently evaluating the intervention using a randomised controlled trial. Data collection is currently ongoing. However, to date, we have recruited over 4,000 people into the trial, and we have collected a rich data set on active travel, including the proportion of active short local journeys within Yorkshire and Humber, factors associated with active travel, including physical activity, as well as a range of key demographic characteristics, data on the effectiveness of behaviour change techniques for supporting active travel, and also rich data on the barriers and facilitators for active travel. Next slide, please. Lastly, projects on anti-doping by Professor Lambros Lazouris fits within our theme and closely aligns with AWRC. This includes Project Safe You, which aims to better understand the reasons why young exercisers and athletes engage in doping practices and design interventions which aim to prevent doping use, and Whistle, which is exploring whistleblowing relating to doping and illegal use of drugs and sport supplements. So thank you for listening. I'll hand over to the next theme leads.
Is Charlotte there? Or Kate?
Sorry, I just realised I'm on mute, Maddie. Sorry. So I'm Charlotte Coleman, and I work with Associate Professor Kate Whitfield on the Preventing, Reducing and Investigating Criminality and Exploitation theme. As Maddie's outlined previously, we shorten this to PRICE. It's a lot easier to remember. So our theme's possibly less relevant to your work, although we do have some overlap, which I'll outline as we go through. So we're a new theme in CeBSAP. Generally, previous to this, we were a much smaller forensic research group that are growing in strength and number. We tend to work cross-disciplinarily with police, probation, prisons, legal systems, education, and so on. So we also work with mental health and charitable sectors. As you can imagine, some of the drivers for violence around access to health, particularly mental health and others. So it does have some overlaps with the work of the AWRC. We work collaboratively with other research centres such as CRASA, CERCI, DLC, and also Centric. We also have a lot of collaborative external partnerships with organisations such as Violence Reduction Units, Ministry of Justice, police forces, and so on. Next slide, please, Maddie. Some of our key areas of work are around violent crime, and we generally are working alongside the new moves to adopting a public health approach to violent crime, so that we're looking at intervention-based work that's either primary, secondary, or tertiary. And this seems to be where a lot of the research and contract work interest lies, is in this public health approach. You may have noticed for the first time this year that the NIAHR put out bids for public health focus on crime, which is one of the first times I've seen big bids like that come out in this area. So it's interesting to see that the landscape is now changing towards this approach. So some of the things that we've currently exploring in our projects are around domestic abuse, knife crime, child sexual and criminal exploitation, offender rehabilitation and resettlement, gangs, the use of mentoring to reduce violent crime, and probably the one that's probably more aligned to your area is the one around the diversionary activities and sporting activities for young people. Next slide, please, Maddie. So this is where I've outlined a little bit more about some of the projects that we do that's aligned to this diversionary or sporting activity work. So I'm not sure if you're aware of programs across the UK that are using this idea of a teachable moment. So they use the points at which young people first come into contact with big organisations such as hospitals, such as police stations and so on, and use that as a reach-in moment to try and work with them through mentoring and other activity work to try and get them to reduce their involvement in crime or to reduce their risk of being involved. So a new venture this year has been the introduction of these teachable moments programs within schools. Generally, the programs are called navigator programs, and so we have things like the hospital navigators. The Plan B is generally the name for custody navigators, where young people are met for the first time being held in custody in police cells. And the schools navigators is when they're on the cusp of their first exclusion from school. What the navigators programs generally offer is some kind of mentor support and signposting to referral services, but often the programs also include a lot of diversionary work, so getting young people involved in sports and extracurricular and team activities, because we know that there's a real value from the use of such diversionary work. I mean, as it stands at the moment, a lot of this is under exploration to see how much of an impact diversionary work has on reducing violent crime or reducing risk of being involved in violent crime. So, but this is where the landscape of most of our work and input is. So it's it has direct overlaps, I think, with some of the work that you're doing. That the activity isn't just about ensuring people have healthy lives in terms of their biological selves, but also in terms of their futures. It provides a future for these young people, and it changes a lot of other aspects of their lives. So it's very important that we keep a focus on this. Other impacts on these programs, we have the ETE support, education, training and employment, but the key hook for young people is those diversionary activities. It's not only important for their mental health and well-being, it's also important for getting them to engage with the other components of the program. Next slide, please, Maddie. So projects that we've worked on that relate to this are, these are all local projects. So these are happening within South Yorkshire that we've evaluated. So we've got Big Brother Burn Grieve. So this uses football, basketball to improve young people's mental health and self-development. So this is a secondary prevention intervention. So this is working with young people who've already had some involvement in the criminal justice system. Similarly, Fight for Good and Sport for Good run very similar secondary prevention interventions, but theirs uses boxing clubs and mobile gyms, but they can also get a sport and fitness qualification through being involved in Fight for Good and Sport for Good, and also Yo-Yo Sport, which uses football, and this is a primary prevention intervention. So this goes out to much younger cohort of children. And in addition to reducing their risk of being involved in future violent crime, it's also aims at reducing current antisocial behaviour, particularly within schools. Next slide, please, Maddie. Other related work that we've been involved in, or work alongside people in our department who are involved in this, and you might already know of Chris Fitzgerald, who runs Mind Body Connect and looks at reducing substance misuse through sport. And we also have a PhD student looking at an in-class activity programme for children to reduce their classroom disruption behaviours and other ASB behaviours outside of school. That's it from me. Thanks, Maddie.
Okay, hi, that's me. I am Alessandro Soranzo, Associate Professor of Cognitive Psychology, and I'm leading the Applied Theory and Research Method theme, which is, as Maddie anticipated, a cross-theme across the CeBSAP. So next slide, please. So we are experts in experimental research methods and statistical analysis, and these are critical tools for researching a host of questions about human behavior in a controlled and a scientific manner. We are experts in quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods approaches. So, for example, we conduct Bayesian statistic, randomized control trials, multi-level modeling, sorry, questionnaire, survey, etc. And qualitative methods, for example, interviews, focus groups, narrative approaches, discourse analysis, thematic analysis, and so forth. So every day, the application of psychological theories and research methods solves problems and improves lives. And our expertise spans this field and address how people learn, think, and respond to their environment. We have a number of facilities. Some of them have been already anticipated by Lean, for example. We have eye tracking, EEG, visual perception lab, retinal images, video suite, etc. Now, I'm going to present two case studies to showcase how how this theme can contribute to a variety of research questions, and to, for example, it can, if you have any research question that you want a solution from a methodological point of view, just drop me an email. So next slide, please, Maddie. So the first case study is a mutual beneficial collaboration between psychology and EY Lane 4, which is an establishment supporting organizations through their transformation journey by delivering people development that impacts beyond their work. So in this case, the research question was, what happens to well-being when athletes retire? The majority of athletes experience some form of difficulty associated with their transition to retirement. And therefore, a program was developed to raise awareness and understanding of the psychology and emotional journey of athletes' transition. Next slide, please. So an intervention through a qualitative research with former Olympic athletes investigated the kind of support that can help athletes to achieve a better transition. So these former Olympians attended a series of monthly workshops designed to promote and facilitate the process of adjustment following their retirement and maximize their well-being. So there have been a pre and post survey to evaluate the well-being, resilience, and support seeking. And the post-intervention included also focus group and one-to-one interviews with the attendees. And the collaboration has been very fruitful because all participants indicated that they had gained practical and psychological results from the participation to the program. And the success of the study that was conducted in Sheffield was rolled out nationally with support from the British Athletes Commission. And to date, the workshop have been hosted in London, Manchester, and Leeds as well. So, and of course, other form of output has been academic journals from this research. Next slide, please. Now we move to a second case study, a mutually beneficial collaboration between psychology and design here in our university, just to show. So, for example, if you want to develop any tool and you want to assess people's reaction to these tools, well, just come to us. So in this case, the design center wanted to develop interactive objects that are three-dimensional physical artifacts that exhibit autonomous behavior when they are handled. Here we can see some pictures of these objects. And the questions was, of course, what type of object people like most? What do they have to do? And what can be their shape or the material? As you can see here, we have objects made of fabric, some other in plastic, different shapes, different size. And actually these little Arduino motors, they allow the object to perform different behaviors. Next slide, please. And so we conducted a few analyses involving the population from Sheffield. More than 800 people from Sheffield was recruited to support this research. And we discover basically that people do like interactive objects, in particular with some specific characteristics. For example, they like when the object vibrate, when they are curved, and when they are made in fabric. This is just obviously an example. And then further, we could also classify the people, so we were able also to target different people for different objects. So as I said, the collaboration has been very fruitful with the design, because design experts had the knowledge about how innovative objects can be built. We in CeBSAP, we had the methodological expertise to help them to find out what people like, what type of objects are the best, the most desirable. And output, again, we had funds, we have academic journals, and as I mentioned, the public engagement from a population of Sheffield. I think that's it from me. Thanks.
Thanks, Ale. So we haven't got any, we've kind of kept it fairly brief in terms of the descriptions of the sort of themes and the kind of work we do, because we wanted there to be plenty of opportunity for discussion. And there's, you know, it's quite hard to fit everything into those slides, but hopefully they've given you a flavour. It is a very broad research centre, but I think we have lots in common, lots of areas that we can work. So hopefully that's given you an idea and we can have a helpful discussion now. So I'll stop sharing our slides so we can see everybody.
Great, thanks Maddie, and thanks colleagues from CeBSAP for taking the time to kind of prepare that summary and also during the meeting this afternoon. Are there any, I've got several links and question things, but anything from colleagues who'd like to explore at this stage? I'll try and keep an eye on the hands up. Steve.
Only that Rachel and I have already had a bit of a chat in the background, and we're going to meet. So active travel, one conversation, and I guess physical activity across the South Yorkshire and Basset Law, or not Basset Law, integrated care system is another discussion. So I'll start with Rachel first, keep it sweet, and then I don't know where we'll go from there. We'll discuss it. So, but great stuff, really, as usual. I've heard some of it before, but great to see how it's all kind of mushroomed. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. I can now cross that off my list of things that I was going to take on. So brilliant. Any other questions from Shona?
I've already forgotten the names of the groups, but the one that was interested in the young offenders, etc. I think there's some clear links with your wrong language, leveling up health inequalities agenda or inequalities agenda, because virtually all of that stuff travels in lockstep with index of multiple deprivation. So you just get increasing problems in all aspects of life with decreasing, so we'll call it socioeconomic position. It isn't strictly that. So there's, you know, I think there's an opportunity for a lot of shared activity and learning and exchange, interdisciplinary exchange of approaches, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I agree, Shona. Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, that was really interesting. Thank you. Nikki and I work on the neurology program at the AWRC. So the full title is Neurological Rehabilitation Research and Innovation Program. As a team, Chris, Nikki and I work on the program, and we're all physios by background. So we absolutely welcome broader disciplines and perspectives into the work that we're mapping underneath the programme as well. So I know that we've picked up the conversation earlier, but I think hearing the presentations today has really prompted us to think about refreshing that conversation and taking it forward. So I think we'll be in touch soon if that's okay.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I think it would be useful if we could hook up a little more regularly and share research ideas and activities.
And one of the other problems is outsiders sometimes mix up which department at SHU you're talking to. So they'll be burbling on and it's about you and it's actually about AWR. You know what I mean? Like, so it's helpful if you know about each other.
Agree. Thanks, Shona. Chat. Charlotte, do you want to come in?
I was just wanting to say I agreed with Shona about the focus for young people and how those inequalities are driving factors around violence and crime. I think we're definitely going to be seeing increasing amounts of funding being put into this area to try and prevent that. And it's good to make the connections here, because we are always looking for good people to work with to join the teams around this to get that expert input. So absolutely, we'll bear that in mind. Might be a good idea if anybody's interested to being involved in that, if they maybe put their names together or get in touch with us somehow, and we can have a further chat about how we might overlap. That'd be really helpful.
Richard Wilkinson, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's one of the big health inequalities people, national guy. He's got an evocative graph that gets conversations going, and all the local authorities will have seen it probably. And it is the relationship between male homicide under age 25 and teenage pregnancies. And he plots, there's several different versions, but the one that we always use, because everyone thinks we should do things the way the Americans do, it's the correlation is just in lockstep. It's absolutely magnificent, and it has nothing to do with young men going out and shooting someone and going home and getting their girlfriend pregnant. It has to do with the fact that it's related to underlying inequality. Yeah. So it's one of those, like, you put the diagram up and conversation changes instantly.
Agreed. Yeah.
Thanks, Shona. And I think some of Dave's work and the insight that he's getting into what that life is like and some of the challenging opportunities, particularly around physical activity and the role that can play as a moderator. Some of this will be quite interesting to kind of feed in. Okay, are there any other questions for folk? Just looking around the screen. I think one thing that jumped out for me, and this fits with the way that the AWRC is set up as a research centre, because it is philosophically quite different than the way that perhaps CeBSAP is set up and some of the other research centres that you collaborate with, is our focus is about bringing together the different expertise from multiple disciplines to focus on physical activity, as opposed to delivering programs and projects through disciplines like psychology. And so in essence, it's a bit cheesy, but you all are AWRC in terms of the expertise that you bring from Sheffield Hallam University. And I was thinking about, and was again inspired by the themes and the work that's going on with the themes, but particularly the expertise and how that might relate to some of the companies that we have potentially coming through the accelerator. Thinking about the skills, both in terms of research design that was talked about by Ali's presentation, and then also the commercialization element of some of your work, Lynn, and thinking about, okay, are there opportunities here, not just for the companies that might make it onto the accelerator, but perhaps the ones that don't, and are there other opportunities that we might be able to pick up? So I think there's that commercialization angle we could do some work on, and then also thinking about the benefiting in terms of the research design and methods that could be applied into some of the evaluation of products and services and their application into different contexts, whether that's a health setting or otherwise. So there's real opportunities there, both within the R&D stuff, I think, that I kind of picked up on that. And I know that at the moment, Terry Senior, as part of the R&D team, does some of that initial scoping. But Jason, I'm wondering if there's opportunities to perhaps engage CeBSAP colleagues in maybe that early phase.
Very much so, Rob. I'd spoken to Maddie about this a number of months ago about connecting through, and especially now the accelerator phase 2 is launching the company through the door. So I'll definitely knock on your door, Maddie, for sure.
Great. And then the final thing for me is a conversation that I've yet to have, but is in the pipeline with Sarah Pearson in Surrey. And I pinged an email which essentially said the 12 missions that have been articulated from the government around levelling up. How might we respond? I was thinking with an AWRC hat on, in terms of where physical activity can make a contribution. Particularly, they relate to the health inequalities and the well-being related missions. And there's more, of course, that I'm sure CeBSAP will have interest in. But I was thinking about, can we pull together can we get a chunk of funds from somewhere, pull it into a pot, and put a call out across the organisation for interdisciplinary groups to get together with a business external to the organisation. It could be an SME, could be a large organisation, and with a community or voluntary sector organisation as a team, and almost create some kind of, I don't like using the term Dragon's Den, but innovation teams where we create a vehicle that enables us to have those conversations, but has some funding at the end that we can actually do something with. And so I've got a conversation with, I think Sarah had similar thoughts. I don't know if that's filtered down to you as yet, Maddie, and wider CeBSAP team, but I'm having a conversation with Sarah on Friday about what that could look like. I'm really keen to see if we could do something along those lines, just to see how Hallam might respond in a bit of a proactive, innovative way to some of these challenges before we wait for the government to tell us how wonderful they are and what they're doing. I thought we could perhaps give them some ideas that might help them along. So if that sounds of interest, that either might come via Sarah, or if not, it could be something we directly come back to you with.
Yeah, that certainly sounds of interest, Rob. So I hadn't heard that via Sarah, but yeah, very keen to be involved in that. And I just wanted to say, in terms of our many themes and the theme leads and things like that, if you're thinking, who do I contact, we have got that central cebsap@shu.ac.uk email address. So just, if you can't remember what theme it's in or what person, just send like messages to there and we'll make sure they get to the right people. I know that that's a bit overwhelming in all those slides. And as I say, we've not been able to represent everybody's work today. I know there's other colleagues from CeBSAP here today who we perhaps haven't kind of mentioned their work. But yeah, so do get in touch, even if you don't know who the right person to talk to is. We can make sure we can link you up. We're really keen to be kind of involved in those early stages of planning of projects, so that we can make a contribution all the way through. So that's kind of one of the sort of aims when Rob and I spoke about this a while ago. That kind of making sure that we're sort of round the table at the beginning of things is what we're really keen to be able to do.
Yeah, brilliant. Sharing it.
So just for future reference, because I don't know how many people are aware of this, I actually trained in interdisciplinarity, so I know how to bridge the gaps, and everybody thinks they are, but in actual fact, you're generally talking past each other because you use the same jargon to mean very different things. Now, psychology to you guys is probably not a big gap. But one of it's actually my role in the Horizon 2022 reviews that I'm doing right now, is I often spend a lot of time explaining, participant action research to randomized controlled trial people and RCT principles to qualitative researchers. So I spend a lot of time bridging those gaps, but I'm also an expert in inequalities, and I have been working in the area for 30 years. So I understand. And part of the reason I'm interdisciplinary is because it's not just about individual behavior or just about smoking or anything along those lines. It's a complicated social issue. So I'm always available because I'm heading into retirement. God knows I'll never get to retire, but I'm heading into retirement.
Thanks, Sharon. And just to note, Ed, your comment in the chat, it's one of the things that we've talked about how we might create and measure a set of outcomes that are appropriate to understand the impact of what this levelling up agenda might look like. Can I just close just by thanking all of you who've contributed to that presentation and conversation. I know you've got 1,000,001 things that you could be doing other than being here this afternoon, so I really do appreciate it and recognise the effort that's gone into that. And it's always really exciting to hear about the research that you're doing. It's some fantastic stuff, and I know that there's good opportunities for collaboration between our centres. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Please do stick around. We've got 10 minutes left and an exciting agenda item next around our public involvement in research. So Claire, I'm going to hand over to you at this point.
Set me up there, Rob. I'm not sure if it's going to be that exciting, but I'll do my best. Okay, I've just prepared a couple of slides, so I'll just share those with you. I just thought it'd been some time since we spoke to you about PIRG. And
not come through on. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, we've got new people since then, so just wanted to just really bring it back to forefront of people's minds, really. So just give you a bit of a overview of sort of where the public involvement research group is at. So we've got 18 active members at the moment. 2 of them, our co-chairs, are both joining us on the call today, so Greg and Shirley. We've reviewed 24 projects so far, and given feedback for those projects. I'll go into a little bit of a breakdown on those in a second. Completed a review in December for that activity up to date. So we started in July 2020, and so that review just runs for that first 18 months or so, which I can send a copy of that report round after this meeting. We've had a workshop that we held with a group of the members in January to explore some key areas for development of the PIRG in 2022, which again I'll come on to shortly. The main one, really, the big one, is we've got a target to increase the number of projects that we review, and we'd like to be reviewing 50% of all submissions in 2022. That is quite an increase and quite a big target for us there, but we really are seeing the benefits of projects coming through, and I've just put a few quotes on there, just because we do genuinely get really good feedback from researchers when we have gone through this process. And I think there is probably, I know a lot of when calls come out, there's obviously a hell of a lot of work that you guys have to put into these putting these bids together. And it probably seems like another thing you've got to do to add to your list, but we really do make it as easy as possible. And we can go down 2 different routes. So we can either do a paper-based review where you fill in a pro forma and we send it out to the group, and then they send written feedback. Or what we're seeing more increasingly is we're doing more live reviews. So we'll put, 3/4 of an hour in the diary, set up a meeting, usually get around an average of about 8 members that join those meetings, and you can do a bit of a presentation and then ask your questions and get feedback live. And we can record that session for you as well if you want, so that you've got to go back to after. And like I said, they're becoming more popular to do it that way around. So just to give you a little bit of a breakdown on what we've been doing, so with the projects that we reviewed, we've done individual reviews. We've done 15 of those, and then we're looking at the group ones. It's, like I said, they're sort of to move up, so we've got another 2 coming up in this next couple of weeks. The stage of the projects does tend to be bid preparation, but that doesn't mean to say that that's the only time we can do it. Post award, we've done quite a number of reviews of patient information leaflets, just general patient information that might be going out there, so that we can say, okay, from our public, from our members' perspective, they might have these comments, or I couldn't do that, can't be able to do that particular thing, or that doesn't quite make sense, can you, that sort of thing. But we can be available right from the initial ideas before you've identified your funding source, just to get that public involvement. And again, when you're putting your final reports together and things like that. So just to the next one graph, just to show you a bit of a split across the different research themes and programs at AWRC where we've done our reviews. So not too bad, even split there. And then, as you can see, we've done reviews on PhD projects, research fellowships. We even did a bit of a review with some research placement students last week as well, on the work that they'd been doing. So I think they took quite a bit away from that. So just coming on to sort of the development, I thought it might be quite good to just share with you what we got out of the workshop. Just so the the developments for what we're looking at for 2022 are around how we can make group work better for the members of the group, but also work better for you guys as researchers and bringing it to the group. So I'll not read through all this in detail, and I will share the slides after, but there's 8 key areas that we were looking at the workshop. Increasing project numbers, I've already mentioned. So why do we want to do that? So we can review, provide feedback and enhance research bits with that public voice. So we're going to be raising awareness with Colocators, which is obviously what I'm doing today. I've already been in touch with the RIS support teams so that they're aware of PIRG and what we can do and how we can help. And we're looking at things like SAMP events and that kind of thing. We want to recruit more members so we can increase that diversity and that lived experience. So we're going to be looking at identification of community groups and how we can make links, but also understanding what the barriers might be, because there are barriers there. It might be technological barriers for people, it might be cultural barriers for people. So we're going to have a bit of a look into that. Proposal distribution, that's really about, we were doing it one sort of way and we're now looking at how can we make sure we're getting the best feedback from those lived experiences. So we're trialing sending out to all members rather than just select members, and using a use of a third space to be able to do that. Project updates, it's really good if when the members of the group can get a bit more feedback later down the line. You know, they've reviewed these projects and then at the moment we've not got a really great feedback loop in terms of what happens. Does it get funded? It'd be great to have people who bring their projects for review to then come back to later meetings and give a bit of an update. So we're going to look at how that might work. Training and development, we're going to put something in place to do a bit of some introduction to PPI training for the people who've not done patient and public involvement work before, and see if we can identify some of the needs, some technology training around the use of Teams and that sort of thing. Shared learning, there's obviously, we've reviewed 24 bids projects already. So we're thinking that actually the members will build up a bit of knowledge around, oh, we see this sort of thing quite often, or we have to frequently go back and ask this type of question. So we're going to look at how we might be able to collate some of that, so we can, when you fill your proposal, then we can send that information up front to try and help right up at that initial stage. And we can also put together some example questions, what other people have asked when they've come to us to do the reviews, and so that you can, so again, you've got some sort of idea. The third space is all about being able to connect the members between quarterly meetings. So we're currently in the process of setting up and rolling out Microsoft Teams and doing some further development around how we share the documents and how we communicate. And then finally, just around our actual quarterly meetings, we want to make sure that we're making best use of the members' time and how we inform them what's going on in the AWRC, what's going on in the wider college. So we've got John Wheat coming to speak to the group next week at the meeting, so we're going to look at who might be able to contribute at future meetings, and also we need to allocate a bit more time. We try to incorporate a live review into those meetings, and there's always so many questions that we tend to run out of time. So really that were just my slides. I did forget to say right at the beginning of this that I'm the coordinator for the Public Involvement Research Group, for anybody who doesn't know me, alongside my other role at AWRC. So if anybody has got any questions or anything, or you might want to bring a project for review, just drop me a line and we can sort that process out. We do turn these things around quite quickly, so we can try and fit with your timescales as much as possible. And like I say, I think, you know, the feedback that we've had has been really great, and we want to keep our members busy and keep them engaged. I'll stop sharing because that was my last slide. I just wondered, seeing as we've got Greg and Shirley, is there anything that you guys wanted to say while we've got the group's attention?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, just quickly say hello to everybody. I know most of the faces on today, but there's a few new ones. Yeah, I think what the last couple of years it's been strange times for all of us, and it has been for the PIRG group as well. So what we've been focusing on recently is really kind of quite procedural stuff, and getting our quarterly meetings to be a little bit different, a little bit more slick in our approach on the sort of procedural side, and then that frees us up. We have those quarterly, so for a year, and then that frees our time up to look at projects, and we are looking at quite a few projects. But as Claire has just said, there we're always looking for some more. So we're looking to ramp up a bit now, really. So that's probably the key message, I think.
Has anybody got any immediate questions or anything they'd like to ask about PIRG or? No? Okay, well, I'll leave that with you, and I'd just, like I said, really encourage you, you know, to just come to us if you've got any ideas, if you want anything to be, you know, looked at, or bring it through the group. We'd look at quite a variety of different things, and we've got a lot of expertise, people from different backgrounds, different careers, different health conditions, various different things, really. So always plenty, they've always got plenty to say, which is yeah, it's great.
Thanks, Claire. And just to I've personally been on the end of some really fantastic feedback for some of the large trials that I've submitted through NIHR from the PIRG, and the insight that you get is fantastic. It's open absolutely to CeBSAP colleagues as well. If you have studies that you would like to engage the PIRG with, if you don't have that access to that function, then you're welcome to engage with us through this process, because it really is fantastic. So I'm just going to go around the room, and if you have any other business that you would like to raise at this meeting, please let me know. Yeah, we'll definitely circulate the slide, Charlotte, and also put a link to the recording of the session, so that people that have missed it get a chance to watch it back. Check my other screen. Okay, so if there's no other business, thank you all for your time this afternoon. Fantastic session, really appreciate it, and I look forward to catching up with you all soon. Enjoy your evenings. Cheers, everyone.
Well, cheers, Rob.
Bye.
See you later, everyone.
Bye. Bye.